All right, gather round, you intergalactic eavesdroppers. You think you've heard all the humans are space orc stories. Well, buckle up your tentacles, because boy, do I have a tale for you. This isn't your standard human punches alien, everyone claps narrative. No, this is the story of how one very clever or very foolish, depending on who you ask, human managed to turn an entire alien academy upside down with nothing more than a few furry friends and a whole lot of chutzpah. Our tale begins at the prestigious Galactic Institute of Xenobiology, or GIX for short. Picture a place so posh, even the air molecules wear little bow ties. This is where the brightest minds from across the cosmos come to study the intricacies of alien life. And by brightest minds, I mean beings so smart they make Stephen Hawking look like he's still working on his times tables. Enter our protagonist, one Zoe Chang, human exchange student extraordinaire. Now, Zoe wasn't your average human. Oh no, she was what the galactic community politely referred to as a Deathworlder, and what less polite circles called that crazy species that lives on a planet trying to kill them 24/7 Earth. That little blue marble of madness had produced yet another agent of chaos to unleash upon the unsuspecting universe. As Zoe strolled into her advanced xenobiology class, her classmates, a motley crew of tentacled, furred, and gelatinous beings, gave her a wide berth. It wasn't personal, mind you. It's just that when your new classmate comes from a planet where even the plants can kill you, you tend to be a bit cautious. Plus, there was that incident last week when Zoe sneezed and half the class thought they were under chemical attack. Good times. Professor Xyloplax, a being that looked like a sentient fern, had a torrid love affair with a disco ball, nervously rustled his fronds as Zoe took her seat. Ah, MS. Chang, he photosynthesized, his voice sounding like wind through particularly pretentious leaves. So glad you could join us today. I trust you're prepared for our practical lesson on non-threatening creatures from across the galaxy. Zoe grinned, a sight that sent shivers down the spines or equivalent support structures of her classmates. Oh, you bet, Prof. I've got some real cuties to show the class today. Now, if Professor Xyloplax had been paying attention, he might have noticed the barely contained laughter in Zoe's voice. But alas, like many educators across the universe, he was too busy trying to remember if he'd remembered to water himself that morning to notice the impending doom. Excellent, Xyloplax exclaimed, his bioluminescent spots flashing in what passed for enthusiasm among his species. Now, class, today we'll be examining some of the gentlest creatures in the known universe. Who would like to go first? A timid raise of a pseudopod came from the back of the class. It belonged to Blorp, an amorphous being from the planet Goop. Blorp oozed its way to the front of the class, carrying what looked like a sentient cotton candy. This Blorp gurgled, its voice sounding like a straw at the bottom of a nearly empty milkshake, is a Fluffion cloud puff from the gaseous plains of Nebula IX. It subsists entirely on positive thoughts and gentle breezes.
The class cooed in unison as the cloud puff floated around, occasionally nuzzling against a student and leaving behind a trail of glitter. It was so saccharine sweet that Zoe felt like she might develop cavities just by looking at it.
Marvelous, Blorp Professor Xyloplax beamed, his leaves quivering with delight. A perfect example of a non-threatening creature. Who's next? One by one, Zoe's classmates presented their chosen harmless creatures. There was the singing crystal of harmonious VII, which emitted soothing lullabies. The empathic moss of Feels a Lot, which changed colors based on the emotions around it. And who could forget the Huggle worm from the Cuddle Nebula, a creature so gentle it apologized for existing. With each presentation, Zoe's grin grew wider, and her barely contained laughter threatened to burst forth like a supernova. Finally, it was her turn. MS. Chang, Professor Xyloplax said, his voice tinged with both curiosity and trepidation. What non-threatening creature have you brought to share with us today? Zoe stood up, her eyes twinkling with mischief. Well, Prof, I thought long and hard about what to bring. After all, Earth is known for its dangerous fauna. But then I remembered some of our gentlest, most beloved creatures. She reached into her backpack, and the entire class held their breath, or equivalent respiratory function. What horror would this Deathworlder unleash upon them? I give you, Zoe announced with a flourish, the humble house cat. She pulled out a small carrier, and from it emerged a fluffy calico cat. The feline yawned, stretched, and looked around the classroom with casual disdain. The reaction was instantaneous. Half the class dove under their desks, the other half froze in terror. Professor Xyloplax's fronds tied themselves in knots as he tried to process what he was seeing. The great galactic greenhouse, he sputtered. MS. Chang, what is the meaning of this? You were supposed to bring a non-threatening creature. Zoe blinked innocently. But Professor, this is Whiskers. She's a common house pet on Earth. Children cuddle with them. Old ladies collect them by the dozens. They're practically the definition of harmless. The cat, seemingly annoyed by all the commotion, began to groom itself. This simple act caused several students to faint. But Professor Xyloplax stammered, those claws, those teeth, and why does it have murder in its eyes? Zoe chuckled. Oh, that's just how cats look. They're actually big softies. Here, let me show you. She approached Whiskers, who had finished her grooming and was now eyeing a particularly shiny student with interest. As Zoe reached out to pet her, the entire class gasped in unison. Miss Chang, no, Professor Xyloplax cried out. You'll lose your hand. But to everyone's amazement, Whiskers simply leaned into Zoe's touch and began to purr. The sound, a low rumble that to human ears was soothing, sent shockwaves of terror through the alien students. See, Zoe said, grinning. Harmless. Professor Loplax, his color changing from a vibrant green to a sickly yellow, tried to regain control of the situation. Well, yes, I suppose if it's domesticated, but surely this can't be representative of all Earth fauna. Zoe's grin widened. Oh, of course not, Prof. I brought a few other examples of our gentlest creatures. Who wants to see a dog next? The collective scream that erupted from the class could have been heard in the next galaxy. Deterred, Zoe reached into her seemingly bottomless backpack and pulled out a golden retriever puppy. The furry ball of energy bounded out, its tail wagging so fast it threatened to achieve liftoff. This is Buddy, Zoe introduced, as the puppy began to enthusiastically lick her face. Another common Earth pet. They're known for their loyalty, friendliness, and ability to make even the grumpiest person smile. The alien students, however, were not smiling. They were too busy trying to comprehend the horror before them. To their eyes, Buddy was a slobbering monster with razor-sharp teeth, powerful jaws, and an unstoppable urge to approach, and horror of horrors touch everyone in sight. It's attacking her, one student shrieked as Buddy continued to shower Zoe with affectionate licks. No, Zoe laughed, her voice muffled by puppy kisses. This is how they show love. Professor Xyloplax, who had retreated to the relative safety atop his desk, fronds wrapped protectively around himself, managed to find his voice. MS Chang, while I appreciate your unique perspective on non-threatening creatures, I must insist that you contain these beasts immediately. Zoe sighed dramatically. All right, Prof, but I haven't even shown you the best one yet. The class, thinking things couldn't possibly get worse, was about to learn a valuable lesson about the dangers of underestimating human creativity. With a flourish that would make a magician jealous, Zoe pulled out her piece de resistance, a small, adorable bunny rabbit. This, she announced proudly, is Thumper, the epitome of gentleness and innocence in the animal kingdom. For a moment, there was silence. The alien students, having been traumatized by the cat and dog, weren't quite sure what to make of this new creature. It was small, covered in soft fur, and had long ears that twitched adorably. Some of the braver students even began to inch closer, curiosity overcoming their fear. Professor Xyloplax, still perched atop his desk, peered down at Thumper with a mix of suspicion and reluctant interest. It doesn't seem to have the same predatory features as the others, he admitted cautiously. Zoe nodded enthusiastically. Exactly. Rabbits are herbivores. They eat plants, not meat. They're so harmless that on Earth, they're often associated with peace, gentleness, and fertility. The tension in the room began to ease. Some students even dared to smile. Maybe, just maybe, this Deathworlder had finally brought something that wouldn't haunt their nightmares. And then Thumper yawned. It was a small yawn, really. Just a tiny opening of the mouth, a flash of teeth. But to the alien students, it might as well have been the gaping maw of a black hole ready to devour them all. Chaos erupted once more. Students scrambled over each other in a mad dash for the exits. Professor Xyloplax, in his panic, activated his spore defense mechanism, coating himself and half the classroom in a thick green pollen. Amidst the pandemonium, Zoe stood calmly, Thumper cradled in her arms, Whiskers winding between her legs, and Buddy sitting obediently at her feet. She couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of it all. "Come on, guys," she called out to her fleeing classmates. "They're more afraid of you than you are of them." This, of course, did nothing to calm the situation. If anything, it made things worse. The idea that these terrifying Earth monsters could feel fear was simply too much for the alien students to comprehend. As the last student squeezed through the door, quite literally, in the case of the amorphous blob from Goo Prime, Zoe found herself alone in the classroom with her menagerie of dangerous creatures and a shell-shocked Professor Siloplax. "Well," she said, trying to suppress her laughter, "I guess class is dismissed early today." Professor Siloplax, still dripping with pollen and clinging to his desk like it was a life raft in a stormy sea, managed to rustle out a response. "Ms. Chang, I think we need to have a serious discussion about your definition of non-threatening." Zoe nodded solemnly, though the effect was somewhat ruined by the puppy now attempting to climb up her leg for more attention. "Of course, Professor. But maybe we should clean up first. I don't think that pollen is going to come out of the ceiling easily." As if on cue, a glob of green pollen detached itself from the ceiling and landed with a splat on Zoe's head. Whiskers, seeing this new toy, immediately pounced, batting at the drooping strands of pollen-covered hair. And that, dear readers, is how Zoe Chang, human exchange student and inadvertent agent of chaos, managed to get advanced xenobiology cancelled for the rest of the semester. It's also how she ended up with a new nickname, the Terran Tamer of Terror. Word of the incident spread quickly through the Galactic Institute. Students from other classes would peek into the xenobiology lab, half expecting to see the remnants of some great battle. Instead, they'd find Zoe calmly cleaning up the mess, her Earth pets helping in their own unique ways. Whiskers was doing an excellent job of spreading the pollen to previously unaffected areas. Buddy had appointed himself official mop, his wagging tail spreading water from the cleaning bucket far and wide. And Thumper? Well, Thumper was just being Thumper, hopping around and looking adorable, occasionally nibbling on a stray piece of paper. The Institute's administration was, to put it mildly, less than thrilled. Emergency meetings were called, protocols were reviewed, serious discussions were had about the wisdom of allowing Deathworlders to bring samples from their homeworlds. Zoe, for her part, found the whole situation hilarious. She'd only been trying to show her classmates that Earth creatures weren't all doom and gloom. It wasn't her fault if her alien peers couldn't handle a little fur and friendliness. As she scrubbed at a particularly stubborn pollen stain, Zoe couldn't help but wonder what would happen if she brought in some of Earth's actually dangerous animals. A lion, perhaps, or maybe a hippopotamus now that would really give them something to panic about. Lost in these amusing thoughts, she almost didn't notice when a small, tentative voice spoke up behind her. "Excuse me, Zoe." "Joey." She turned to find Blorp, the amorphous student who had presented the Fluffian cloud puff, hovering nervously in the doorway. Well, as nervously as a being without a fixed form could hover. "Hey," Blorp, Zoe said brightly. "What's up? Come to help with the cleanup?" Blorp rippled in what might have been a shudder. "Not exactly. I was wondering, could I perhaps touch one of your creatures?" Zoe blinked in surprise. This was unexpected. "Really? You're not afraid?" Blorp's body swirled with a mix of colors that Zoe had come to recognize as embarrassment and curiosity. "I am terrified," Blorp admitted, "but also fascinated. The way you interact with them, it's unlike anything I've ever seen." A slow smile spread across Zoe's face. "Well, Blorp, my gelatinous friend, you've come to the right place. Which one would you like to meet first?" Blorp's gaze darted between the three Earth animals, each one looking back with varying degrees of interest. Whiskers had paused in her pollen-spreading activities to fix Blorp with a calculating stare. Buddy's tail was wagging so fast it was creating a small breeze. And Thumper? Well, Thumper was busy being criminally adorable. Perhaps. The small one, Blorp bubbled hesitantly, a pseudopod extending slightly towards Thumper. "Excellent choice," Zoe beamed. She gently picked up Thumper and moved closer to Blorp. "Now, don't worry. Thumper is very gentle. Just let him sniff you first, okay?" Blorp quivered slightly, but held its ground as Zoe brought Thumper closer. The rabbit's nose twitched rapidly, taking in the unfamiliar scent of the alien student. Then, to everyone's surprise except perhaps Zoe's, Thumper leaned forward and gently booped Blorp with its nose. The reaction was immediate. Blorp's entire body lit up with a rainbow of colors, rippling with what could only be described as pure joy. It's, it's so soft, Blorp exclaimed, a pseudopod carefully extending to stroke Thumper's fur. Q. Continue. Oh, certainly. I'll continue the story from where we left off. Zoe grinned. See? Not so scary after all, right? As Blorp continued to marvel at Thumper, more curious students began to trickle in. Word had spread that the terrifying earth creatures were actually not that terrifying. Soon, the classroom was filled with a cautious but excited buzz of activity. Aziz Tarex, a student with more eyes than Zoe could count, was cautiously petting Whiskers, who had decided that this many-eyed being was the perfect audience for her napping skills. Buddy was in heaven, receiving belly rubs from no less than 3 different species simultaneously. And Thumper. Well, Thumper had become the unofficial class mascot, hopping from student to student, leaving a trail of awed whispers and colorful exclamations in his wake. Professor Xyloplax, having finally unstuck himself from his desk, watched the scene unfold with a mixture of trepidation and fascination. His fronds were still slightly stained with pollen, giving him the appearance of a very confused Christmas tree who had gotten into a fight with a glitter factory. MS. Chang He rustled, approaching Zoe with caution. I must admit, this is not how I expected today's lesson to go. Zoe, who was in the middle of showing a particularly brave Arcturian how to play fetch with Buddy, grinned up at her professor. Isn't this great, though? Look at how much everyone's learning. And indeed, the classroom had transformed into a bustling hub of interspecies interaction. Students who had earlier been fleeing in terror were now eagerly asking questions, comparing the earth animals to creatures from their own worlds and engaging in heated debates about the evolutionary advantages of fur versus scales versus gelatinous membranes. I suppose Professor Xyloplax admitted reluctantly, there is a certain educational value to this chaos. Just then, a commotion near the back of the room caught their attention. Gleep Glorp, a student from a high-gravity world who resembled nothing so much as a sentient boulder, had managed to coax Whiskers onto their lap. The cat, finding the warm, smooth surface to her liking, had started to purr. The sound, which had earlier sent students running for their lives, now drew a crowd of curious onlookers. What is it doing? Gleep Glorp rumbled, their crystalline structure vibrating slightly in response to the purrs. That's called purring, Zoe explained, moving closer. It means she's happy and comfortable. A ripple of amazement went through the gathered students. The idea that a creature could produce sound simply to express contentment was a novel concept for many of them. Fascinating, Professor Xyloplax murmured, his scientific curiosity finally overcoming his fear. And you say this is a common reaction in earth felines? Zoe nodded. Yep, cats purr when they're happy, but also sometimes when they're stressed or in pain. Scientists think it might have healing properties. This revelation sparked a flurry of questions from the class. How did the purring mechanism work? Could it be replicated? What other surprising abilities did earth creatures possess? As Zoe fielded question after question, she couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Sure, her initial presentation might have caused a bit of a panic, but look at them now. Her classmates were engaging with earth fauna in a way she had never expected. Even Professor Xyloplax seemed to be coming around. He had produced a data pad from somewhere within his fronds and was furiously taking notes, occasionally reaching out a tentative leaf to stroke Whiskers. You know, he said thoughtfully, perhaps we've been approaching our study of earth life forms all wrong. We've been so focused on the dangerous aspects that we've overlooked the gentler side. Zoe beamed. That's what I've been trying to tell you. Earth isn't just about death and danger. We've got plenty of cuddles and cuteness too. As if to emphasize her point, Thumper chose that moment to hop onto Professor Xyloplax's head, nestling comfortably among his fronds. The professor froze for a moment, then slowly relaxed as he realized the rabbit meant no harm. I think I'm beginning to understand, he said, a note of wonder in his voice. The rest of the class time flew by in a whirlwind of interspecies bonding. By the time the bell rang, or rather, the psychic pulse that served as a bell in a school catering to species with wildly different sensory organs, not a single student wanted to leave. As they reluctantly filed out, many stopped to give one last pat to their new Earth friends. Blorp, who had started the day terrified of Earth fauna, was the last to leave, giving Thumper a gentle boop with a pseudopod before reluctantly oozing out the door. Once the last student had left, Professor Xyloplax turned to Zoe, Thumper still perched contentedly on his head. "Chang," he said, his voice a mix of exasperation and admiration, "I believe you've just revolutionized our xenobiology curriculum." Zoe grinned, reaching up to scratch Thumper behind the ears. "Just doing my part for interstellar relations, Prof. So, same time next week. I was thinking of bringing in a goldfish, to ease them into the whole Earth has creatures that live in liquid thing." Professor Xyloplax's fronds twisted in what Zoe had come to recognize as the Xyloplaxian equivalent of an eye roll. "Perhaps we should stick to fur-bearing creatures for now. I'm not sure the class is ready for the concept of animals that voluntarily submerge themselves in dihydrogen monoxide." As they began to clean up the classroom still liberally splattered with pollen and now also covered in fur, kibble, and the occasional rabbit dropping, Zoe couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Sure, it hadn't gone exactly as planned, but isn't that what science was all about? Unexpected results leading to new discoveries? She glanced at Whiskers, now curled up in Professor Xyloplax's desk drawer, at Buddy, who had appointed himself official greeter at the classroom door, and at Thumper, still happily nestled atop the professor's head. Yeah, this was definitely a successful experiment. As she packed up her things, Zoe's mind was already whirling with ideas for the next class. Maybe she could bring in a hamster? Or a guinea pig? Ooh, or what about a hedgehog? The mental image of her alien classmates trying to figure out why a creature would need built-in spikes almost made her laugh out loud. One thing was for sure, advanced xenobiology was about to become the most popular class at the Galactic Institute of Xenobiology, and Zoe Chang, accidental ambassador for Earth's fluffiest and friendliest, was just getting started. Little did the rest of the galaxy know, but a revolution in interstellar relations was about to begin, one purr, woof, and hop at a time. Epilogue. In the years that followed, Zoe Chang's impromptu Earth Pet Day became legendary at the Galactic Institute of Xenobiology. What started as a chaotic classroom incident evolved into an annual event, drawing students and faculty from across the galaxy. The Institute's curriculum underwent a significant overhaul, with a new emphasis on understanding the full spectrum of life on deathworlds like Earth. Professor Xyloplax, much to everyone's surprise including his own, became the leading expert in Terran zoology, with a particular fondness for rabbits. He could often be seen giving lectures with Thumper, IVA descendant of the original Thumper, perched atop his fronds. Blorp went on to become a renowned xenobiologist, specializing in the therapeutic applications of Earth-animal interactions for various alien species. Their groundbreaking research on purr therapy revolutionized stress management techniques across the galaxy. As for Zoe, she continued to bridge the gap between Earth and the rest of the galaxy. Her best-selling holobook series, Cuddles from the Deathworld, became required reading in schools across the Galactic Federation, and Whiskers. Well, let's just say that cats, true to form, wasted no time in establishing themselves as the true rulers of the galaxy. Alien civilizations may have mastered faster than light travel and unlocked the secrets of dark matter, but they were no match for the enigmatic allure of a purring ball of fur. In the end, it turned out that the most effective ambassadors for humanity weren't our diplomats or our scientists, but our pets, who knew that the key to intergalactic peace was a wagging tail, a contented purr, and the occasional well-timed bunny hop. As Zoe liked to say in her galactic TED Talks, in a universe full of wonder and terror, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is to reach out and pet something fluffy. And that, dear readers, is how Earth went from being known as the terrifying death world to the galaxy's go-to source for cuddles and cuteness. Not a bad legacy for a planet once considered too dangerous to approach, eh? But hey, that's humanity for you, always keeping the rest of the universe on its toes, or tentacles, or pseudopods, or whatever appendages they happen to have. The story of Zoe Chang and her furry ambassadors became a cornerstone of human-alien relations. It sparked a whole new field of study, comparative interspecies companionship. Universities across the galaxy started offering courses in human-animal bond theory and deathworld pet management. The Galactic Tourism Board, once hesitant to promote Earth as a destination, now couldn't keep up with the demand. Aliens from all corners of the cosmos flocked to Earth for the chance to experience the thrill of petting a dog, the honor of being ignored by a cat, or the joy of watching a rabbit do absolutely nothing for hours on end. Of course, there were some hiccups along the way. The Great Hamster Incident of 2157 is still spoken of in hushed tones in certain corners of the galaxy. And don't even get me started on what happened when someone thought it would be a good idea to introduce alien species to the concept of the platypus. Let's just say it involved 3 physicists, a metaphysician, and a lot of confused screaming about the laws of nature being broken. But for every misunderstanding, there were 1,000 moments of connection. The sight of a Zarblaxian tentacle monster gently cradling a kitten became a symbol of interspecies harmony. The annual intergalactic dog show drew more viewers than the Galactic Olympics. And the phrase "who's a good boy" entered the lexicon of at least 17 different alien languages. Zoe herself became something of a celebrity. She was invited to speak at conferences, consult on interspecies relations, and even starred in her own holoreality show Zoe Chang Pet Detective. The show followed her adventures across the galaxy, solving mysteries with the help of her ever-growing menagerie of Earth pets. The episode where she and Buddy cracked the case of the missing Arcturian crystal eggs by following a trail of tennis balls is still considered a classic of the genre. But perhaps the most profound change came in the way the galaxy viewed Earth and its inhabitants. No longer were humans seen as just the crazy, danger-seeking adrenaline junkies of the cosmos. Now, they were recognized as a species capable of forming deep, meaningful bonds with creatures that most of the galaxy had previously considered mindless beasts. This new understanding led to breakthroughs in diplomacy, science, and philosophy. The human concept of empathy became a hot topic in alien academic circles. There were heated debates about whether the ability to form emotional bonds with other species was a strength or a weakness in evolutionary terms. Some alien species even began to reconsider their relationships with the creatures on their own worlds. The Vorblaxians, a species known for their stoic practicality, caused quite a stir when they announced they were going to start keeping pet rocks. They're very low maintenance, a Vorblaxian spokesperson explained, and they're excellent listeners. Of course, not everyone was thrilled with these developments. The Zugzorbian Empire, long-time rivals of Earth, tried to dismiss the whole thing as a human plot for galactic domination. Today, it's cute, furry animals, their supreme leader warned. And tomorrow, who knows? We could all be enslaved by their strange Earth magic. His warnings might have been taken more seriously if he hadn't been caught on camera cooing over a litter of kittens during a secret diplomatic visit to Earth. As for the pets themselves, they took their new role as galactic ambassadors in stride. Dogs were, unsurprisingly, thrilled with the expanded opportunities for belly rubs and games of fetch. The cats regarded their new alien admirers with the same aloof disdain they'd always shown humans, which only seemed to fascinate the aliens more. And rabbits? Well, they just kept on doing what rabbits do best, looking adorable and multiplying at an alarming rate. There were even rumors that some of Earth's animals were developing increased intelligence due to their interactions with alien species. Reports of cats solving complex mathematical equations or dogs learning to pilot spaceships were generally dismissed as tabloid nonsense. But then again, in a galaxy where a human girl and her pets had already turned interstellar relations on its head, who could say what was truly impossible? As the years passed and Earth's integration into the galactic community deepened, historians would look back on Zoe Chang's classroom demonstration as a turning point. It was the moment when the galaxy realized that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe isn't advanced technology or military might or even intelligence. Sometimes it's a simple act of kindness, a moment of connection between 2 different species. And so, dear readers, the next time you find yourself gazing up at the stars, wondering what strange and wonderful beings might be out there, remember this: in a vast and often terrifying universe, a purring cat, a loyal dog, or a fluffy rabbit might just be the greatest ambassador we could ask for. After all, in the grand cosmic scheme of things, couldn't we all use a little more love, a little more gentleness, and a lot more cuddles? Now, if you'll excuse me, I think my cat is trying to take over my keyboard again, probably planning her next step in galactic domination. But hey, as long as she lets me pet her while she's doing it, I'm okay with that. The end. Or is it just the beginning of a fantastic new era of galactic harmony?